There we go.
All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming. We had to get our live video up so our online viewers can tune in real time. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Jonathan Camboris, and I am the administrator for the Youngstown Historical Center of Industry and Labor. It is my great honor to welcome you all to tonight's continuance of the Merchant Lecture Series, an initiative that continues to bring together community leaders, nonprofit professionals, scholars, to share their unique perspectives on the work they do, why they do it, and how it connects to our collective and industrial heritage. Over the course of this series, we've heard from a diverse array of voices, recent graduates entering the field of social or history in general, curatorial staff illuminating the growth of our downtown area and its industrial roots, and also members of the community who have lived, worked, and preserved the legacy of the industries that built Youngstown. Each speaker has enriched our understanding of this region's past, bringing it to life in ways that inspire, educate, and honor the sacrifices and ingenuity of those who came before us. The merchants and sponsors of this lecture series share a powerful vision: to remember and honor our past while preserving what will remain for future generations. Their dedication is vital, and tonight we express our gratitude for their unwavering support, especially during these challenging economic times. Collectively, with Youngstown State University's history program, the Ohio History Connection, and the Friends of the Youngstown Historical Center of Industry and Labor, we are working to ensure that the stories of our community endure in Youngstown. Youngstown was and is a city built for industry by industry. When events like the explosion of the Realty Tower remind us of the physical and human labor that shaped our skyline, we are called to reflect on the hands and minds that made this city what it is. This series and our gathering tonight is a testament to our commitment to that legacy. The Mahoning Valley, with its unique geographic importance, stands as a crossroads of transportation, innovation, and industry. The connections between these processes and the labor of countless individuals resonate through time, shaping not only our past, but also our present and future. Tonight, we are privileged to hear from Belinda Weiss, director of the Niles McKinley Memorial, who will deepen our understanding of President William McKinley's ties to labor and industry. He left an indelible mark on the fabric of this nation, and I'm sure her insights, for the first time ever I hear, will help us connect his legacy to the story of our community. The mission of the Youngstown Historical Center of Industry and Labor is to collect, preserve, and interpret industrial and labor history of the Mahoning Valley, the region, and the state of Ohio. Our vision: keeping history alive, relevant, and interesting. The museum is one of the anchors of downtown, connecting it with the university and the larger community. Part of that mission is to enhance our exhibits with compatible programming, such as this lecture series, which we have presented since 2023. For more than 30 years, the Eagle staff has collected objects, documents, newspapers, photographs, films, oral histories, and other materials related to the iron and steel industries, including everything from industrial technology to the lives of everyday workers and their place in the greater Mahoning Valley. This evidence of our past helps us to understand what happened and why, and disseminate that to the broadest audience possible. This lecture series is designed from our staff here at YCL to provide a place where participants can engage in thoughtful exchanges of ideas as they learn more about what happened in the past and how and why it makes us who we are today. Steel culture, as our curator says, it's in your blood. I like to say it's also in Youngstown with a capital Y-O-U. As we continue this journey of learning and reflection, let us remain committed to honoring our history, preserving its artifacts, and sharing its stories. Thank you for being a part of this important work, and thank you, Belinda, for joining us this evening. So let us all give a warm welcome to Belinda Weiss.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank for the invitation also to come and speak. And as Jonathan mentioned, this is, you are the first that gets to hear this presentation. So it's, yeah. So it's been a labor of love for a little while. I actually read the entire Dingley Tariff, which is close to about 100 pages. So if anyone would like a recommendation for reading, I highly recommend it. It's really interesting. So, but before I get into the Dingley Tariff, I feel I needed to back up though. Being a history professor as well, I feel that you can't just talk about something by itself. You need to go back. You need to give like some pretext to it, and then also what happened after. So I'm going to be backtracking a little bit, but I promise I will be getting to the Dingley Tariff. So, okay. All right, so I said we're going to backtrack a little bit, and this will explain a little bit about why McKinley embraced the idea of a tariff. And so we have to go back to post-Civil War, the two issues that there were following the Civil War. And one of them is going to be the money currency issue. And actually, this is going to be one of the main issues in the 1896 election, gold standard versus silver standard. And I mean, a lot of people were for the idea of sound, stable money being based on gold. Farmers and those with smaller businesses were for the idea of a silver standard, where we would inflate prices, that way they'd be able to make more money off of their goods and services. They'd be able to actually, there'd be more money minted in mine because silver was a lot less expensive. So that's going to be one of the issues. And the farmers, and that's one of the ones that McKinley wanted to protect. He felt that they had been dealt quite a blow, and they had more trouble getting credit. They had higher interest rates. There was crop liens against their property, their harvest, and so a lot of times they had to exchange the idea of their title for their property to be able to get products, to be able to get machinery, and they would end up losing it all. So he wanted to protect them. So that's going to be one of the issues. The other is going to be manufacturers versus consumers, I said. And by manufacturers, I mean, they're going to be producing things, and because of a tariff, they're going to have to raise prices, which of course is passed on to the consumer. So how much should the government really get involved? How many rights should how many rights should the federal government have versus state rights? So there was always going to be that kind of back and forth battle too. So just to kind of put that in pretext there. Okay, so what is a tariff? We're hearing a lot about it now too. So when I was first asked to talk about this in particular, it's much more timely now. so it's a lot of people saying like, oh, are you gonna get into all stuff happening today? No, not touching that one. So we're gonna talk about what was happening with McKinley. So what is a tariff? Well, a tax or duty to be paid on a particular class of imports or exports. These are just definitions, literally offline that I found. A tax imposed by one country on goods and services imported from another country to influence trade, raise revenues, or protect interests. So you get the idea here. Synonyms that you'll see me use throughout this: duty or tax in tariff. So that's kind of all interchangeable. So. Okay, so to really understand the tariff issue and McKinley's fondness for it, We need to backtracking to the early 1800s, 1816 to like the 1820s. Henry Clay was really the first one to propose this idea of a tariff. And he's the seventh House Speaker, also the ninth Secretary of State. And this would have been not long after the Revolutionary War, so it would have been a way of promoting American business, of promoting entrepreneurship, promoting America, and creating that sense of independence from the old world. So Henry Clay was very much for that. Also have another tariff I want to talk about too, because this is just kind of sort of a little history of tariffs too, just real brief here. John Calhoun, who was Vice President to John Quincy Adams, he was very much against the 1828 tariff of what he called tariff of abominations. And this was in the South, and actually prior to the Civil War, a lot of people know, but South Carolina had threatened to secede in 1830 because of this tariff. There was such high prices on the commodities that they needed in the South that they retaliated, so much so that the government actually repealed this in 1833. So, during the Civil War, I talked about post-Civil War issues, but during the Civil War, there were tariffs to fund the Union, 5 separate ones actually, and then after that, they kept that in place to basically fund the war debt. And then also the Union veterans, their pensions, which of course created a continuing division between the North and the South, because the South did not feel they should have to pay this, because it wasn't the Confederate soldiers or the veterans that were included in this. So there's still some things going on after the Civil War. And of course, during the Gilded Age, we're getting closer to McKinley here. This is closer to his era here. 1873, Mark Twain coined this term gilded, and it was after his novel, The Gilded Age, A Tale of Today. Basically just saying that you can cover something in gold, but underneath it's still rusty, there's still problems. So it's talking about the economy. And so this is what they're trying to address, and this is what McKinley's trying to address. But prior to his presidency, even whenever he was in Congress. His whole idea, of course, is to protect the economy and promote American business. That's going to be the ultimate goal here. Okay, so we're getting into McKinley finally. I told you we would get there. So, all right. So McKinley's early career. He was very much on board with this idea of a gold standard, but he also thought that it would be a great idea if we could combine the two, this idea of bimetallism, incorporating silver as well. So he was very much on for both, because he wanted to really protect the farmers, he wanted to protect the workers. That was his ultimate goal. And so he was for this idea of the high tariff. I mean, he's called the tariff man. There's a lot of political cartoons depicting this in not such positive light. But his idea for the tariff, though, was not so much for the government to make revenue. That wasn't his ultimate goal. His idea was to create higher wages, better jobs for the people, and this idea of nationalism, of protecting American interests versus anything that would be like foreign and unfair to Americans. So that's what the whole issue was. And then creating like a valued workforce, creating this idea of valuing your work, valuing the outcome of it, like what you're putting out. So that was the main premise behind his idea of being for the tariff. So didn't mean it as a negative thing whatsoever. The Coinage Act of 1873, despite McKinley and others being for this idea of bimetallism, a lot of overseas countries decided that they weren't going to go the way of bimetallism or silver. They wanted to adopt the gold standard. So the Americans were kind of forced to do the same thing if you wanted to compete. So the Coinage Act of 1873 solidified that, at least for a little while. But then you have the Bland-Allison Act, and we have Robert Parks Bland and William Allison, 2 congressmen, who brought back this idea of we need to have silver also. We need to help the workers, protect the workers. And McKinley was for this. And this was one of the few times he went against his really good friend Rutherford Hayes. Rutherford Hayes would have been president at this time, elected in 1876. And McKinley at the time was a member of the House of, he's a member of the House and Ways and Means Committee. And so he had been, still promoting this idea of tariffs and he was still talking about that. But that was one issue that he departed with Hayes on, was this idea of the gold and silver standard. He wanted to incorporate silver as well. Now, McKinley in 1889 is going to lose his bid to become the Speaker of the House. So he becomes chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, which allows him a lot more time to work on, you guessed it, tariffs. And and no surprise then, in 1890 is going to be the first McKinley tariff. So before there was a Dingley tariff, there was what was known as the Tariff Act of 1890, or also known as the McKinley Tariff. And here we go. Here's I love political cartoons. I think that they tell so much about what is happening. Here we see McKinley. This was in 1888, Harper's Weekly. We see that talking about cloth and whiskey. These are two things that are going to be specifically mentioned in the tariff that he was going to be proposing, and the final thing that would come through in 1890. The two of the things that he would have been a little bit obsessed with. And up there, and it's very difficult to see, but up right in here it says, if you don't see it, just ask for it. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, it's a little difficult to make out, but if you don't see it, just ask for it. Basically referring to all the different things that this tariff covered. Now, the McKinley tariff is not quite as long as the Dingley tariff, but still pretty substantial too. There's 709 specific things listed, and it goes into great detail about each thing that was to be tariffed. Okay, so let's talk about the McKinley tariff in 1890. There's 450 amendments. Before it finally went through, there was 450 amendments. McKinley himself was getting quite annoyed with this, and even said, I scarcely know what will be the end of it. Like, what was this going to look like at the end? And it wasn't exactly how he wanted it to be, which I think is probably true of most legislation, how it's proposed, and then the end result, there's always going to be amendments, always going to be something a little different. So he was a little annoyed by this, but there's 709 very detailed sections. Overall, and that depends on the sites that you look at too. It raised taxes on things at 38 to 49%. I have seen as high as 52%. So if you can even imagine that, the pizza that was bought today, I'm not sure how much that cost, but imagine, 52% more. Imagine that. You probably wouldn't have pizza here. but that's on an average what it raised though. That's right. So basically anything that could be produced in America was going to be taxed, because that was the whole idea. That America should be producing it. Yes?
The question I have is, it raised the duties or it raised the cost? The reason being, the duty is what it's already taxed. Did it increase the tax by that much?
It didn't exactly say. I mean, this is what it says: is it raised duties to 38 to 49 point something percent. So you just see like varying percentages of that. So I'm not sure like what the final cost of things were. I mean, that was a little bit more difficult to find. So
if you raise the cost of the pizza by half, it's going to kick people off, and you won't sell it very much.
Well, yeah, that's actually what was happening with the tariff, though, too. So, yeah, because
if you raise the taxes by half, yeah, it's going to make people angry.
Well, I'm getting to that. So, how do the people? I'm getting there. So, okay, so anything that was produced that could be produced in America should be, and so anything else was going to be taxed and taxed heavily. And the whole purpose was to address inequities. Okay, so again, anything that could be produced here should, and anything that had to be imported. I mean, so there was just this idea. There's things that were going to be on the free list. If we couldn't produce it, it was going to be on the free list. You could get that for cheaper. we could produce it, there's going to be heavy penalties for purchasing that and not being American made. They did cut internal taxes on tobacco, and when I talk about securing the reciprocal trade, a lot of agreements would have been reached with countries just to make sure that they weren't raising tariffs too high on things that we couldn't produce ourselves. We wanted to kind of keep that trade going. So that's what that reciprocal trade. All right, so the country very divided over this. Business owners were divided on this as well. They had to raise prices because we couldn't make everything that they needed to produce their items. So if they're paying more to make something, guess who's going to be paying more to buy it? We are. I mean, that's just how it goes. So that was passed on to the consumer. And in 1892, the Supreme Court, the case Field versus Clark, makes tariffs unconstitutional. For this reason, there's so many people upset over this that the Supreme Court case ruled against it, saying no more. And then 10 treaties were passed with other countries to encourage trade. And the big thing, though, is the people speak up in 1892, same year. Benjamin Harrison loses to Grover Cleveland, and the Senate and the House switch too. No longer is in control of the Republicans, it goes to the Democrats. And just to give you an idea, 171 seats down to 88. So it was pretty substantial. So tells you what the people thought of the McKinley tariff. They did not like the McKinley tariff. In 1894, when Dems were in power, Wilson-Gorman tariff, that was passed in 1894. William Wilson, representative from West Virginia, he was the current chair of the House of Ways and Means Committee, and Arthur Gorman, named for him, he's Senator of Maryland, that's who it's named after. And it was an effort to recover from not only the McKinley tariff of 1890, but also the Panic of 1893. And one thing I should mention too, because this ties in with McKinley's presidency, one of the things that was on the free list in the McKinley tariff in 1890 was tin. And so that meant that tin could just be imported and that wasn't going to be heavy tariff. But then there were tin factories in the United States and they were doing poorly because, well, they couldn't sell their tin if it could be imported cheaper than what it could be made here. So, and the reason why I'm mentioning this is McKinley had a good friend who had a tin factory, and McKinley invested heavily in this and actually co-signed on a loan. When this business went under in 1893 during the panic, McKinley had to shell out quite a bit of money, and it would be millions today. He didn't have it. Ida, his wife, came to the rescue with that one. Her family did have money. It was so much so they were talking about him running for president in 1896, and he was prepared to say, I'm not going to be able to do it. I do not have the funds to do it. So just to show you just how close that came to, just because of tin being on the free duty list. So one of the things that this did too is it raised the federal income tax. If anything over $4,000 was taxed an additional 2%, so you can imagine that there was some backlash against that too, which was no surprise that the Wilson-Gorman tariff didn't last very long. It was repealed in 1895. Collin versus Farmers Loan and Trust Company, another Supreme Court case, that basically repealed this tariff. But in the 16th Amendment, though, that was in 1913, so not too long after this, then the government made it legal then to have income tax. So, which we're all thankful for coming up here, right? Okay, so McKinley. I was talking about the issues surrounding the 1896 election. Okay, one is going to be, of course, the currency, gold versus silver standard. But for McKinley, it's all about the tariff for him. I mean, he really felt that do it better than what it was with the McKinley tariff, that there had to be a way to help these workers. I mean, he really thought that this was the answer. So talk tariff, think tariff, dream tariff. That's his quote, and then that's really just describes like how he felt. And as far as the currency issue, he downplayed that a little bit. He said that that's not really the main issue here. The main issue is the tariff. The main issue is industry, the workers. You don't get customers through the mint, you get them through the factory. Another McKinley quote. Of course, his running mate is William Jennings Bryan. Pretty animated character. I don't know if anyone's ever like seen anything about him or like read anything or listened to his speeches, but yeah, very animated individual. And some of his quotes here: clear-cut issue for the race between the money changers and the struggling masses who produce the wealth and pay the taxes. So he's really making this about rich versus the poor, Main Street versus Wall Street. So protection has slain its thousands. The gold standard has slain tens of thousands. So for Bryan, it was the tariff and the currency issue. And McKinley, of course, was more focused on the tariff. But 1896, of course, McKinley ends up winning, as we know. But before we get to that, too, just another political cartoon. Okay, there's Bryan there, and the caption says that basically every time that William Jennings Bryan opens up his mouth, it basically weights down McKinley. It gives him more weight. So basically he did talk quite a bit, but it's but there's another one, and again, just focusing more so on that issue of the currency, not so much the tariff. So, and that was more so because of McKinley. Okay, now this is going to be difficult to see, but I will point out some things for you, and even I have a little bit of a bigger copy here too. But okay, so we see McKinley. Does everyone hear me for a second here? Okay. So, all right, so he is holding a sickle here, and that sickle says financial honor. Okay, and he's going to be using the sickle, financial, I think that's a sickle. I'm not really good on my farm equipment or this tools. I don't know. Yeah, okay. All right, so repudiation, debased currency, those are things he's going to be cutting down over here. Anarchy, populism, and then it just says crazy finance. All these things are going to be directed, of course, at William Jennings Bryan. And up here, though, is his coat and his hat, and that says high protection and then tariff. So you can see like what he is making the main issue here as far as the election. Okay, so McKinley is victorious, and McKinley just had a way about him too, just a very personable person. Matter of fact, every relationship that he forged, even as a young boy, he maintained those relationships. So kind of case in point, the museum that I work was the whole idea of Joseph Butler, so Butler Art Museum, St. Joseph Butler. So he and McKinley were good friends. They met at a little schoolhouse, and that's where the site was chosen for the museum. So McKinley just had this way about him of just maintaining these friendships, being very personal with people. And so he developed a special relationship with the workers and the laborers too, and he was just able to bring things down to a level, explain to them like what he was wanting to do. So he's talking about this idea of sound money, protection, how it's going to benefit American trade, American business. And it says, I am opposed to free trade because it degrades American labor. I am opposed to free silver because it degrades American money. So again, so he is addressing those two issues there, the tariff and of course the currency issue, the gold standard in that statement. So a very brief statement, very much to the point though. And going back to the political cartoon we saw with Bryan, you see all those things just kind of spewing out of his mouth. Bryan would talk a lot. McKinley was more just to the point. He could just say something like this and just be like right to the point. And I do find that too, just with with teaching. Sometimes the more you talk, you lose students. And it's just like, you need to be right to the point, so, but, yeah, so McKinley had that gift though. All right, so this is a statement from McKinley, and this would have been in regards to the Dingley tariff, which we are going to be getting to in the next slide. So I promise we're going to eventually talk about it. So I'm going to read this. A tariff which protects American labor and industry and provides ample revenues has been written in public law. We have lower interest and higher wages, more money and fewer mortgages. The world's markets have been open to American products, which go now where they have never gone before. We have passed from a bond issuing to a bond-paying nation, from a nation of borrowers to a nation of lenders, from a deficiency in revenue to a surplus, from fear to confidence, from enforced idleness to profitable employment. The public faith has been upheld, public order has been maintained, we have prosperity at home and prestige abroad. And this is in reference to the Dingley tariff. Okay, so Representative Nelson Dingley Jr., hence how the word gets his name, from Maine. And again, McKinley's mission, very much the same as it was whenever he proposed the McKinley tariff in 1890. This idea of protectionism, higher paying wages, better jobs, promote American business against foreign competitors, and especially unfair foreign competitors, to aid the workers, aid farmers. And so his mission is still the same, it hasn't changed. That's always remained. Now, the Dingley tariff, I mentioned how long it is. It starts off with 10 chapters that outline the details, the kind of the broad overview of the tariff. And then it's broken down into sections. So the first section is what is going to be tariffed. And those are schedules A through N. And I mean, there's so many details. And I'll get into it a little bit. We're not going to read the whole thing tonight or anything. But there's a lot of things, very specific things like listed in there, as is in section 2. Some very interesting things in section 2 that were duty free that we will be getting at. So turtles being one of them. It's very detailed. But the 241 specific items mentioned. But it's sections 3 through 34, which are probably the most interesting reading though, because this is where the president can change things if needed. This is where this could be amended as it goes, as it's been seen to be needed. And so vague wording for that reason. And whatever is going to suit American interests, basically. And I'll get again into each of the sections here too, and I'll talk about some of those ones in the sections 3 through 34. But all right, okay, so this is the ones that are going to be tariffed and taxed. Okay, so I said, I'll just mention a couple things like indies that are like somewhat interesting as we go, but we won't go into all of them. But under the things that are going to be taxed, chemicals, oils, and paints. Okay, so perfume, cologne, and this is so detailed that it goes into individual colors of paint. So that's how detailed it is. So individual paint. So 1 through 86. I mean, there's just like so much detail. The earthenware, glassware, just talking about stoneware, eyeglasses. More eyeglasses. Those would be more expensive. Iron ore. These are going to be broken down into bar iron, pig iron, ground iron. Everything is just like listed. So there's so much detail. Anvils are listed under that too, which I'll be coming back to that in a second. Wooden manufacturers, mostly railroad, for railroads or for the hubs of wheels. Sugar, molasses, and manufacturers of. There is a special clause in there that protects our relationship with Hawaii, since we were getting quite a bit of sugar from them at the time. So there is something there to protect American interests there. Tobacco, manufacturers of, so that's pretty self-explanatory. But the animals and dairy products. Chocolate is one of the ones under there. So those of you that like chocolate, I know I'm one of those, but there would have been much more expensive. Spices, so these are all gonna be things that are gonna be listed on that. So, and in parentheses, I have how many individual things are devoted in that category. So there's a lot. There's a lot of individual things there. All right, so alcoholic beverages, spirits, wines, all of that was going to be heavily taxed. Cotton is actually broken down into 3 classes depending on where it came from, or the quality of cotton. So there would be the first class, and that would be Egypt and Great Britain. So there would have been taxes on that. And then we have the little bit lower grade cotton in class 2, and in class 3 would be alpaca, camel, and that sort of thing too. So we have, things are broken down by class or where it comes from as well. So that's how detailed this tariff is. Silk and silk goods, pulp, paper, books, sundries, and under sundries, feathers, human hair. I thought that was an odd one to me. Game pieces as well. So in particular, it lists chess pieces or billboard balls. So all these things are listed. But remember whenever I said that anvils were included under iron. In particular, this guy here was really upset over this one. So there he is with an anvil. So had to put that in there. So. A couple other things. Looks like this went off. There is. I think this went off. Did it go? That goes back. Okay. All right. Some other things that were. Oh no, I want to get into like the things that were free next. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so the next section is the free list. I'm not going to go into much here, but these are just some that I felt like a little bit to be odd. Acorns, stuffed birds, fossils, kelp, leeches, teeth, natural or manufactured. So there's separate lines for that too. Yes.
In the previous 2 slides, you saw a lot of material that people use every day.
Yes.
And yet he's leaving this stuff free. Acorns, okay?
And
Like everybody uses acorns.
Maybe they did. Actually, one of the things that I knew they were using acorns for was coffee.
Well, they did that, but they've already taxed the coffee, so the acorns are free.
Well, actually, coffee is on the free list, so that's.
Is it really?
It is, yeah. Yes, which you kind of ruined my next joke, so thank you.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that's all
Somebody's
right.
got to ruin the joke.
Yeah, that's all right, yeah.
Yes, it's a joke.
So also on the free list, turtles, skeletons, anything that the Library of Congress could use, such as books, charts, maps.
Of course.
And then, okay, here's what John ruined, and coffee, yeah, which I would be really happy about, because I love coffee, so. Yeah, but it would have been funnier if it wasn't.
Good Lord. Well, you gotta give the masses something.
Right. Well, coffee, I mean, you're taxing chocolate, you gotta give them coffee at least, right?
Yeah, but it's tax alcohol.
Yeah. All right, so in the sections 3 to 34, I'm not gonna go through all of those, but, this is where the president could do a little bit of negotiating and add, like amending if needed. Reciprocal trade provisions, depending, and that could change. The country could change, the provisions could change. And of course, made sure that the president didn't have all the power though either. Of course, it had to be approved by the Senate. I mean, so there were checks and balances with this too. So it wasn't like he just had free reign and could do whatever he wanted. But he could negotiate commercial agreements, of course, that have to be approved. He could suspend duties as he saw fit. Had to make sure you used American vessels, otherwise that would have been, which I guess made sense. So, and also in addition to that, Anything for shipbuilding was free to come in so that they could build ships. So that all would have been free. And I thought this was an interesting one. IRS commissioner created a stamp which would indicate that you paid the tax. Going back to pre-Revolutionary War, that was one of the things that the colonists. What is this? Okay. Oh, that's okay. Okay, all right, here we go. All right, 11 hours, here we go through the whole tariff tonight. So there we go. Happen to have a couple copies with me. I brought the McKinley one too. We got this covered. We got 11 hours. That's what you get. That's what you get for reading my joke.
John gets to read it.
Okay, so going back to the pre-Revolutionary War, one of the things that the colonists were upset about was taxation, and one of the things that they had to get were stamps. That they had that were an adhesive stamp that they had to apply to something saying that they had paid a tax. So I thought this was interesting that this was added in here, that this is one of the things that was going to be required to purchase. Of course, there's going to be punishment, like fines are going to be applicable if necessary, and they were oftentimes too. So. Yeah. All right, so I mean, the whole purpose of the tariff, what McKinley, I talked about like what he wanted, protectionism, aiding the workers, aiding business, American business, promoting American business. I mean, that was really the whole idea behind it. So, I mean, it wasn't like there was a malicious reason behind it. It really was to protect the workers. That's really what he thought. Wanted to, just develop American industry so that they weren't so dependent on others. But ultimately, it did lead to higher prices for consumers, though. That was the end result. Increased costs for businesses to do business. So, of course, that's going to be passed on to the consumer, and that's just kind of how that would work. And it made it very difficult, these high rates made it very difficult for the United States business to even compete globally. They found it very difficult to find ports that would even welcome them because of this. And there was like retaliatory tariffs put in place to counteract what the Americans were doing with the Dingley tariff. So less trade was actually happening. The Americans were not welcome as far as to trade what they were producing because we weren't being welcoming to other countries. So other, as I said, other countries began to retaliate as well. And so here's a couple political cartoons in association with the Dingley tariff. Okay, so this one, so we see a group of soldiers, and the one on the horse, his coat is labeled truss, and notice they're dressed as Confederate soldiers. And they're marching down the street, and there's, even there's like the looks on their faces, and then the lady over there, okay, so, and that would be, Barbara Frietjes, and she was a Union patriot, and on her overall there, it says Dingley tariff, give me like points like her bosom there, but that's what it is, and then she's holding a flag that says high protection, so of course in the support of the tariff, and no way you could read that. Imagine you could read that on an eye test there. We would all feel that one, but it's who touches a hair on your swelled head dies like a dog, march on, he said. So basically, don't touch the tariff, just like, and of course that is derogatory against McKinley with this tariff because it wasn't well received, so. And then there's another one, and I couldn't find this without the Alamy, I couldn't find it on another site, but this is the arc of the Dingley tariff. And so we see the Dingley tariff being carried up here on the shoulders of 4 men, and one of those men is someone who I have many letters between him and McKinley, and that is Joseph Foraker. So he's one of those. The other ones are Henry Cabot Lodge, Nelson Eldridge, and Leslie Shaw, and they're being led by this person here, who is Joseph Cannon. And notice the ones bowing down here. The ones bowing down are Trust, Infant Industries, and Monopolies. So notice they're all bowing down to the Dingley tariff, because that's what they, a lot of people said that that's who it was really helping. It was helping monopolies and the trusts, and it wasn't really helping the consumer. And another thing I need to mention before I get to another quote from McKinley is another thing that inadvertently happened because of this tariff is tensions between Cuba and Spain increased. And I'm not sure if does anyone know what happened in 1898 under McKinley administration? Spanish-American War. Okay, so we get involved with that. Okay, so but those tensions increased between Cuba and Spain, and not just because, but a little bit in part of this tariff. And so this is a war that we end up getting involved in, and we end up, of course, acquiring territory outside of the United States for the first time. Prior to that, it was all within our borders. So Guam, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and of course we were a protectorate of Cuba. But more importantly, though, our foreign policy changed. Though it went from one of isolationism to now we were recognized as a global power, and that's probably kind of a nice segue leading to like probably my favorite artifact that we have at the museum where I'm at. It is a carved book. It is a gift to McKinley from the Chinese in San Francisco, recognizing our new power and actually appealing to him for help in regards to open door policy and trade with Japan, Germany, France, England, and basically asking for his assistance with that to make sure that they didn't kind of get lost in the shuffle. So I think it's important to note that too, because this tariff and the Spanish-American War really did kind of change quite a bit, and McKinley recognized this. And this was a day before he was shot, and he was in New York at the time. This was at the Miller Center, and this is the very last speech that he gave. It's much longer than this, but there are a couple things that I wanted to point out that I just kind of pulled out of this speech. The period of exclusiveness is past. The expansion of our trade and commerce is the pressing problem. By sensible trade arrangements which will not interrupt our home production, we shall extend the outlets for our increasing surplus. A system which provides a mutual exchange of commodities. A mutual exchange is manifestly essential to the continued and healthful growth of our export trade. We must not repose in fancied security that we can forever sell everything and buy little or nothing. Okay, so again, I think that this kind of speaks volumes, and it would have been interesting to see like what would have transpired the rest of his presidency if he would have been able to address these issues, because he himself was recognizing that how he thought that the tariff was going to work, it didn't. It wasn't protecting the people. It wasn't promoting American business the way he thought. And whenever he realized that, and he was looking to basically take that back, to make those amendments and figure out something else. Because ultimately that was his goal, was to make sure that the American people were protected, American business was protected. So it certainly wasn't for the government to make revenue off of the consumers or anything like this. So it wasn't meant to be anything malicious whatsoever. So, but yeah, so that's that's kind of like the tariffs in a nutshell, I guess, as far as like the history of them, and as far as McKinley's part in this, and like why he felt so strongly about it, but then also why he abandoned that idea too. And going back to his early days when he was in Canton, practicing law, he was a prosecuting attorney. Canton thrived because of selling farm equipment, which they were able to do so because of a protective tariff in place. So a lot of people surmise that maybe that's where this idea came from. He saw how well that worked there and how profitable it was to Canton. Maybe something like this could work nationwide too. So, I mean, there was a little bit based in that too. He did kind of retract how he thought about this though. This was literally a day before he was shot. He would have been shot by Leon Chagos the next day. So, any questions, comments? Yes.
Okay. So why did the gentleman, the person kill McKinley?
Okay.
Assassinate him?
Okay. Leon Chagos, he was an immigrant. There wasn't much help for immigrants at the time either. And he had actually been targeting McKinley for a little while. There was like 4 separate times prior to him being successful that he was spotted in the vicinity of McKinley. He had a revolver on him too, and then he was just told that you can't have that in the park. But then he left. The reason why though is he blamed McKinley for not only him losing his job but also his family, and they didn't really have any kind of assistance whatsoever. So of course McKinley was going to be the scapegoat for this. So I mean, he was seen as like the high tariff man, the gold standard, and so not much like help for immigrants. So that's why Leon did what he did. So yes. Yes.
So, what does Teddy Roosevelt do as far as tariffs? Does he keep the status quo, or do things start to change?
Definitely saw some changes. I mean, because Teddy was all about like busting up like big business. So we definitely see some change. But this tariff though was the longest running tariff at the time. So it ended up being 12 years. So it was passed in 1897. So it took some time for it to finally just go away. But we did definitely see it dwindle like after McKinley was shot. Though there was not because Roosevelt wasn't on board with all this, because nor was McKinley, so, yeah. All right, and yes.
So Leon was a factory worker.
Yes.
And the tariff was not a good thing, as it turned out,
Right.
for the factory worker.
Right.
It was great for Andrew Carnegie and steel companies, but not good for the worker. So
Right.
can you draw a connection
But
between that and the last 20 years here,
oh gosh.
knowing what we know? And I mean, it's like, here's somebody telling everybody, making bold general statements about how good this tariff's gonna be, and good for the workers, and good for all this stuff. And it was trash.
Right.
So he's leading them down the primrose lane, and the government's leading them along, and they actually believe it.
Yeah,
Is there I know you don't want to get into conclusions to be drawn.
I don't know if there's some similarities between the monetary standard and stuff like that. The gold standard and the silver standard, that's what they wanted to have all of our currency backed by.
Well, the gold and silver standard is one of the better things.
Right, and that's okay, but the tariffs are a tax. They're just a tax, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to make goods that are produced in one country acceptable somewhere else. Because if we produce something here and people in Europe need it, they'll come to us to get it because we have it and they don't. One of the other things though, there has been a big difference in wages between the United States and other countries for a long time. So right now, that's really part of the incentive now for tariffs, because they would like to say, well, we can't be getting this stuff from China, or we can't get things, or continue to get things from Japan because they don't pay their labor any money and stuff like that. So the tariff is going to basically replace that. to make it equivalent with cost for.
So what you're saying is we pick and choose
And then,
instead of a blanket.
right, instead of a blanket tariff, it's a horrible idea, it's increasing taxes. That's what it is. And the person that, the problem with this, if it's a blanket tariff, everybody pays more for the same goods.
Yeah, well, which is why like that section 3, he left that kind of vague wording so that things could be amended and to help protect like the workers and American.
He never does that,
Yeah, well, that's, yeah,
because one of the irate workers shot us.
right, right,
The tariffs are not necessarily a good thing, they're just not.
Shot him after years of discontent.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this was like a long running one at 12 years, and it's, you know, it didn't do what McKinley thought it, I mean, he knew it didn't, I mean, I just read what he said, so it's, he was against his own tariff at the end, so.
So why didn't he do this stuff that he's talking about here earlier? Instead of one day before he's shot down?
Well, I don't think he knew he was gonna be shot, to be fair. I mean,
It doesn't matter, he left, how many years go by? 15 years? 13 years? 12 years or?
well, I mean, but he wasn't here for the whole 12 years. It was 1897 when it was passed, and it was 1901 whenever he had said that. So, you know, not that much time ago, it's only been like 4 years, so I guess, but, you know, in the grand scheme of things, with anything, you need to see it play out. It's not gonna be that apparent just with like months, you know, that, you know. But, so it was 4 years, but I don't think that, you know, but I mean, I don't know, because McKinley didn't tell me, so I don't know. I don't know why they waited 4 years. I don't know. So, I can't answer that exactly. So.
You had 6 points on the board, on the one slide. There was only 2 of them that were any good for the country. 4 out of 6 of those points were bad.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know.
I've never changed that much.
Tough old Dingley.
Yeah, that's, but, I mean, you know, I did mention that coffee was free, so there's that.
It's not now.
No, that's good as Starbucks, right?
There's a dude.
Okay, so any other questions, anything else?
I told you.
Any that I can answer without going back in time and talking to I mean, so
I think the discussion after it's over probably won't.
I don't know if you'll know the answer to this, but,
Okay,
with the tariffs, how did the country's finances look? In
they
general?
actually had a surplus, at the time, so, which is, what I probably should have brought that, so I could have like read that quote, and he even had said, well, I mean, that long quote that I read about like just how the surplus and everything, so going into this, yes, that's what it was, that's what he was not worried about the, revenue for the government, wasn't worried about making revenue for the government, there was already that there, so he was more worried about like what he could try to do for the workers in American business. Okay, anything else? I still got about 10 hours on this, so. Anything else? Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for coming. If you haven't been to the museum where I'm at, come visit me. I'm there Tuesday through Friday, 9 to 4. Be more than happy to talk to you about that building and show you like some of the things I've mentioned, like the artifacts that we have there. Just one of a kind. The one especially that I was mentioning about from China, that's one of a kind. That was a gift given to him. We're the only ones that have that, so it's it's really something to see. It's probably my favorite thing that we have. So, but ask Mark, he was there today. So yes.
That was absolutely one of the more impressive things, and I did not expect to see something like that.
Yeah, there you go. So, It's almost like I paid him to say that in front of me. I did not, just no chance.
No tariff.
Yeah. I'm paying him in pizza, so. Okay, all right, well, thank you very much again. Everyone be safe, going home. Thank you again for coming on. So.
I wanted to express our appreciation to Belinda and sort of want to explore the idea of reading that and having it divided up by amongst our leadership. I think that would be a really cool thing. It'll be long, but there has been a lot of community involvement in the Greek community in Chicago, and they have done very similar things with the trial of Pericles, and they've read quite a few things through schools and scholarship. I like the idea, and I'm committing John to,
Along with the act.
yeah, I agree. So we will
For
be
our
discussing that. I think that'll be great.
All right, sounds good.
So once again, let's give Belinda a round of applause. We appreciate it. And please take some food and have some drinks as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna go get something.
And we also have coffee. Not tariff-free. Let's see.
Well, thank you very much, we appreciate that.